Now let's do an it should throw an error because no username was passed. And I'm not going to lie to you, this can be a little bit tedious writing these different tests out and then going in and writing what you actually need and then going back to the test. And if you're familiar with testing, then you actually know what this cycle is called. It's usually referred to as the red-green refactor cycle. So the red, as in the test isn't working, the green, as in the test is now working, the refactoring it, as in we're now changing it to be a little bit better. Refactoring in this case was when I actually wrote the function and then exported this function and brought it into the test. But then you usually hit back into the red section because you've now changed things around and the test is probably going to fail, and then green, and then refactor. And it can take a while, but in the end, I'm going to have an entire test suite that I can just run to see if everything is doing it correctly. And while it's not going to catch every error, it's going to catch more errors than you would think. It's a really good way to start thinking about writing code. And unfortunately, I see most tutorials absolutely say nothing about testing. All right, so we should throw an error because no username was passed. We're going to basically copy all of this, and I've written this enough times now that I'm really tired of writing it, and I'm going to just take all of this out. So go up here and go to the top of my file and write const test user equals an object. And I'm actually not going to copy what I just took out. I'm going to say first name is equal to test, last name is equal to test, email is equal to test@test.com. Should probably put that in a string. Password is equal to test_test, and username is equal to test_test. That way I don't have to continually rewrite this because it's getting annoying and I don't like it. All right, so now that I took this out of here, I'm going to leave that there. I'm putting it back in, Control Z or Control V if you had it copied like I did. I'm actually going to put this back, and the reason that I'm putting this back is I don't want to have to refactor all of this, even though I probably should. I'm going to leave it alone. This test is going to be just kind of its own test. All right, so now I have a test user. Let's go ahead and copy this. And you'll notice that my argument here is almost identical to the test user that I just created up top. It is identical. So we're going to just do this, test user. Okay, so now we're going to try and do this. The only difference is we're going to change the first name. Oh, okay, so let's make this a let instead of a const. Let. I really can't even do that, can I? All right. I lied. This is going to require too much refactoring. We're going to get rid of that test user. Copy all of this. I might not even include that. Copy all of that and bring it down into here. Except get rid of first name. Okay. So now we're going to put an object in here. We'll say last name, email, password, username, We're not passing any username, we're passing, so no first name. First name, last name, email, password, and permission ID. Okay, so obviously we didn't pass in the username. We can get rid of that then. And what we want to do is make sure that this is not going to actually throw an error. We want it to throw an error, but not outside of the test. So we'll cut that out, and then we're going to say try, because we know that this is going to throw an error. If we look back into our models, where is my model? There it is, models, and we look at our user, we clearly see that the username is required. Although it can be allowed to be null, it's still required. So let's go back into our tests and delete users.js. Okay, so we're going to say try this. And then if it fails, we'll say catch. And remember, I'm going to get rid of all of this. This is pretty obvious. So now let's define what we're doing here. So this, all right, function that should throw exception because a argument of username wasn't passed. So it's going to return a new error. Let's say that this new error's message should be username invalid argument username. Okay, so that's what this should be. And that's it. This is what our test should actually do. So now we'll say expect E to be an error, and expect E.message to equal, and we're just going to copy this string here, invalid argument username. Let's make this capitalized. So invalid argument username. Can go ahead and delete this. Okay. So now let's actually make sure that this can happen. So we'll say if args, if not equal, so if not equal, args dot username throw new error, and we'll just paste that right in there, invalid argument username. Okay, so if args.username isn't present, or if this equals false or 0 or null or undefined, any of those things, then it's not going to be true, and it's going to throw a new username, invalid argument username. So if we run this test, why do I not see a run here? Let's see here. It should throw an error. Here we have this async. Well, this is new. It should throw an error, passing it an async function. Try catch. Sometimes you just have to stare at things until it becomes obvious why something isn't correct. It also could just be that my ID is being dumb. Let's go up here and just run everything and see if that forces it to recognize that this is a test. It is also good every once in a while to first name is not defined to equal. Oop. Should throw an error. There it is. Okay. Ooh. It should throw an error because no username was passed. Something weird is happening here. Let's exit out of this file and reopen it. Expected first name is not defined to equal invalid argument. Oh, look at that. They're right. I didn't define first name. Const first name equals test. Okay. We're still not seeing that though. Let's rerun this. Alright, so everything passes, but for some reason, my IDE seems to be incredibly confused as to what's what. So let's pause this now. Oh, we're going on 44 minutes. Let's pause this video and I will come back in just a second. I'm going to close and reopen this IDE and see what the heck's going on. Okay, I got it to work. Apparently I just had to change is to, or was. Apparently was is not okay. So if I change it to is, it seems to be fine. I don't know why. But that got it to work. So now we see that we have this test. We'll just run it instead of running all the tests. We'll easily see that it passes because everything so far has passed. I want to change this into passing as well. All right, so it passes. Now, this is again tedious because we're going to do this for every single one of the args. So next we're going to copy this test and we'll paste it here and we're going to say it should throw an error because no first name was passed. Okay, open this test up and then we're going to delete first name. But we are going to pass in a password, or not a password, a username. So now we'll say const, or not const, we already said that, username equals test underscore test. Okay, but we're not passing in a first name, so let's pass in a username here. And then in user DB, we're going to write another thing just like this. So we'll say if not equal args dot first name, throw new error, invalid argument, first name. Okay. And obviously, if you don't want to write all of these tests out, Again, like I'm going to, you can just, do this. It's really going to be a lot of copy pasting for each one of these args. But now if we go into user DB tests and we run this, it should nope, it'll fail. It will throw an error, but this is going to be incorrect. So if we look up here, we'll say, oh, what's it saying here? Missing after argument. Oop, I got rid of my object thing here. All right, now we'll let it run. And it's going to say invalid argument username, expected to be invalid argument email. Or not email, first name. Okay, so we see here, we were passed invalid argument username, or this is what we expected. This is what it actually was. So we'll just change this to first name. And now the test should pass. Good. All right. Next argument, last name. Let's copy this. I can hear someone saying, oh my God, he's going to do this for every single one of these. You bet I am. So we'll change this to first name. So we will pass in a first name. All right, in the user DB, I'm going to copy this. If arg.lastname and arg's invalid argument last name. I also probably think there is a way to write a function which basically just goes through this arguments function, picks off the properties, and tells you which properties it's expecting. This is just easier. Is it as pretty? No. All right, so let's do this. Last name. All right, should throw an error because no last name is passed. Okay. And we're expecting this to be last. Let's go ahead and test it, make sure it works. And it passes. All right, next argument, let's do password. So we'll copy this. It should throw an error because no password is passed. All right, so try const username. Password is not going to be passed here, but we do need to pass a last name. So const last name equals, and we'll say test. Okay, pass in last name. And remove password. We're almost done. So const user equals await. Okay, and then in here, we're going to copy this. And say password. We're going to throw a new invalid argument, password. And did I change that in this? I didn't. So we'll say password. And run this test. And it should pass. Good. All right. Final thing is, so we've tested first name, last name, username, password. Oh, we didn't test email, so I'm not at the final thing. Hold on. One more thing, and then we'll talk about the final thing, because I'm going to handle permission ID a little bit differently than anything else. So let's get rid of email and change this to password. Okay, and we're going to say this should be email. And then in our user DB, we'll write another if args.email throw new error invalid argument email. All right, test this out real quick. It should throw an error because no email is passed. Run that test to make sure that it actually does what it's supposed to. Passes, we're good to go. Now, we're going to copy this, but we're not going to use all of it. So my thinking is that if no permission ID is passed, I think we're okay to still create a user. I'm just going to create them with the lowest level permission possible. So if we don't pass a permission ID, we say, so let's add our email back. All right, so we're going to add our permission or email back. If I don't pass this permission ID, so now we have first name, last name, password, username, and email, but no permission ID. I don't want this to throw an error. So I'm actually going to get rid of this try catch block. We are going to still create the user. So then if we go all the way back up to the test before we started throwing errors, we see that if we do create the user, we want to destroy them, and we're going to expect all of this stuff. So let's copy this part of this test, go back down here and paste this in. So one, we want to destroy the user, but we're going to say expect user.permissionID to equal 1. Okay, because that's the lowest level permission. If we look in our users, not our user, if we look, ooh, I don't think I've created the permission ID table yet, have I? Oh, I have, it's right here. I'm literally looking at it. All right, if we look at our permissions table, we have a student, oh, admin is 1. Okay, so we want to do student. It's a good thing I looked at this. So we'll say 2, because that's the lowest level permission. So here we're going to say if not equal args.permissionID args.permissionID is equal to 2. Okay, and there's actually something else we want to do here. We want to make sure that our arguments are or this permission ID, because this is coming from the database, we need to make sure that this permission ID is something that actually exists. And we're going to do that in the next video. Right now, I just want to show you that this permission ID is actually real, and that we're going to add it to here. So let's put a breakpoint right here, and then we're going to run this in debug mode instead of running it as a test. So let's run this as debug. Okay, so now if we look at the args variable, we see that we have a permission ID is equal to 2, even though when we originally passed in our permission or our args variable up here, we didn't include that permission ID. So if we just continue to let this play, whoop, cancel. Continue to let this play out. We won't actually see anything here, but if we actually run this test, we should see that it, not this test. Oh, I didn't rename it. Okay, let's see here. Should create a user, even if no, or create a user and assign them permission ID of. So should create a user and assign them permission ID of 2 as default. All right, so we'll run this test. And we see that it passes. So we now have a good function here in our user DB that can create a user. And yeah. In the next video, we're actually going to talk about how we want to handle this line of code, because I don't want to just have this 2 sitting in here. And also, what if someone passes me a permission ID that doesn't exist in my permission table? That would be really bad. So we're actually going to do something to make sure that this function says, hey, is the argument they're passing valid? All right, we'll do that next video. I'll see you there. Bye.
You said that you needed me like a car.